You're on CYInterview.
I'm Chris Shandak, featured columnist Jay Bilstein is with me. Today on CYInterview, we welcome back Powerhouse attorney Gloria Allred. Today, the United States Senate voted to confirm Ketanji Brown Jackson to the U.S. Supreme Court. Judge Jackson will become the first black woman to serve on the highest court in the land in its 233-year history. Attorney Allred, thanks for joining us on CYInterview. How are you?
Just great, and thank you so much for inviting me on what I should call this historic day rather than this historic day.
Well, I like that very much. So what do you make of today's events?
Well, it's been 233 years of the United States Supreme Court history, and never in all of that time has there been a justice sitting on the court who has been an African-American woman. So this is a great day, and I watched the Senate vote, and I cheered when she received enough votes to be confirmed.
Jay?
Gloria, is Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson the most experienced jurist to be nominated to the Supreme Court in recent memory?
Well, she is extremely experienced and so well qualified. I mean, this is a woman with incredible judicial demeanor, which she demonstrated actually in the Senate Judiciary Committee, this incredibly thoughtful, calm, measured, and just brilliant, demeanor that she had. And she really was not rattled by the really stupid questions that some people, I think, should have been embarrassed to level at her. I mean, it's just, it's beyond just being theatric. It's being ridiculous what some of the Republican senators did. She is the first, and she's not yet a justice, but she will be when she takes the oath. And when she does, which she will become the first justice, I understand, on the U.S. Supreme Court ever to have been a public defender, which is historic in and of itself. She's a graduate of Harvard. She has been, she's the first, or maybe one of the few, I'm not sure which, justices to actually have a combination of trial court experience as a United States District Judge, and then also experience on the United States Court of Appeals. So having had that experience as a public defender, as a trial court judge, as an appellate judge on the D.C. Circuit, I mean, I don't think there ever has been anyone who's had that breadth of experience that she's had.
That is what a lot of very astute commentators have said, and looking into myself, I believe you're 100% correct. One thing I'd really like to drill down on a little bit, though, is this whole notion of her background as a public defender. Do you think that there has been, I don't want to call it a mistake, but an unfortunate slant historically, that most people who are appointed to courts, especially in the federal system, more times than not, if they come from a background of either being for the prosecution or for the defense, most of them come from a prosecutorial background. I'm not saying that about the current composition of the Supreme Court, but if we go to the lesser courts in the federal system, is there something highly important besides Judge Jackson being a woman of color, besides her being an African American, besides her being a woman, is there something highly important for the composition of the court and the federal system in general that we're actually getting a public defender who has, dare I say, a very different working understanding of how the judicial system works, or maybe sometimes doesn't?
Yes, I absolutely agree with you. We haven't had that, or haven't very much of it at all on the higher courts. And you're right that I would say most appointees to courts federal courts, for example, and so, our former prosecutors. I think it is important to have public defenders or people who've had that experience also pointed to the court, because, everyone who is accused of a crime who cannot afford an attorney is entitled to have a public defender appointed to represent them. That's the power of the state is a great power, and people should have the right to have a public defender if they can't afford a private attorney. And that gives those who are public defenders, who, by the way, are generally very, very good attorneys, very, often more experienced in the criminal law than some private attorneys who do criminal defense work. Because people say, "Oh, I don't want a public defender. I want a private attorney, even though I can't afford one." They think the public defenders are not as good, but actually they're more experienced. But I do think it's important to have individuals on that court who've had that experience, represented people who are poor, accused of crimes. Sometimes it's correct that they should have been accused of the crime. Sometimes there's a mistake and they should not have been accused of the crime, and they're not guilty, ultimately, of the crime for which they're charged. So that's enormously important to bring that point of view to the court.
I thought this was really a trifecta here, and the third leg of this trifecta was the fact that she was a public defender. And again, I can't in memory kind of scour my brain and think, when's the last time I heard of a public defender at any level, federal or on a state basis, be appointed to any kind of high judicial position? I don't know that it's unheard of, but if it's heard of, it isn't heard of frequently. And and sometimes people think, well, public defenders are not tough on crime, and it's popular for political figures to say they're tough on crime, but I mean, it's important that people represent those who are despised, who are maligned, who are, accused of crimes. Doesn't mean they're guilty of crimes. Many of them are, but we won't know that unless and until there's a trial or unless they plead guilty. I just think it's really very, very important. And to have the other justices on the Supreme Court be able to hear that point of view from another justice, it'll help them with their own perspective. Well, I'd like to say congratulations to Judge Jackson, soon to be Justice Jackson, but I'd also like to congratulate you, Gloria, because you've been, I think as just about anybody who knows how to read or who's watched television in the last, 20, 30, 40 years knows that you have been on the vanguard of fighting for the underdog and also being very, very vocal about fighting for the rights of women. And, I think people who are old enough can remember what a different place we were in terms of women just 40 years ago. Now, if you're 20 or 30 years old, 40 years ago seems like a long time. 40 years to me seems less and less like a long time. And yes. I think in 40 years we've come a long way, and I think a good part of that is due to your work and people like yourself who had to go up against formidable odds. And so I think this is just a historic nomination in so many different ways.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. I appreciate it, and I hope, by the way, that those listening will also, if they haven't seen my Netflix documentary called Seeing Allred, will see it. It's still streaming on Netflix, and they will see the battles we've had to wage for women and minorities. And of course, I've been practicing law for 47 years. It's interesting that you mentioned the battles, because the very first press conference I ever did back in the 70s was a press conference calling on then Governor Brown of California to keep his promise and appoint more women judges in California, because at the time we felt that he was not keeping his promise after he was elected governor and not appointing enough women judges and enough women to boards and commissions and agencies as well. So I did do that, and then after that, he did appoint some women judges, and after that, I was asked to do another press conference urging him to appoint more. I did it. He appointed more. And then one day I happened to see him, and he said, "Gloria, why do you always accuse me of not appointing enough women judges?" And I said, and he named some that he had appointed. I said, "Governor, you can't name all of the male judges you've appointed. When you can't name all of the women judges you have appointed, that's when you will have appointed enough, and that's when I will stop criticizing you."
Well, you know, you've done quite a lot in your career, and again, I congratulate Judge, soon-to-be Justice Jackson. I congratulate you. One quick, completely unrelated question. It's funny, your name came up. Chris and I were having an off-air discussion a couple of days ago, and I just said, "Gee, I wonder where Gloria would be on this." If Chris Rock came to you and said, you know, the slap heard round the world, the slap seen round the world, you know, I wasn't going to do anything about it, but gee whiz, I've thought twice about it. Would you think his case is a worthy case to take on, or would you say, nah, not my type of thing, or nah, why are you bothering?
Yeah, Chris, I would represent Chris Rock if he wanted to do something. You know, in reference to Will Smith. Chris was absolutely an innocent victim. He was telling a joke, whether you agree with the joke or not. It did not deserve Will Smith coming up and, you know, slapping him or punching him. Yes, he could sue him. You know, he could ask for an apology. He could also ask that Will Smith be arrested. Chris Rock hasn't done any of that. He doesn't have to do any of that. You know, basically, you know, Will Smith has gotten very bad press over this.
Indeed.
You know, he resigned from the Academy membership, which is tough to become a part of. And probably at the proceedings they're going to have later in April, the Academy may decide that even though he resigned, that they're going to take action against him if they can after he resigned. So, you know, Will Smith, there's just no justifying what he did. Chris, rose above all of that and kept the show going and didn't take the bait to strike back. And Chris has got nothing but really positive press ever since. He says he's still processing. He doesn't want to make a statement about it. He will at an appropriate time. No question about it. Right now, I don't think there's anything that he needs to say. And no action he needs to take if he doesn't want to either.
Is there a mistake, though, in the common knowledge? Everybody says, well, somebody's got to press charges. If something is seen in the general public, I mean, seen by millions of people on TV, and I suspect there were I don't have knowledge, but I suspect there were either members of the LAPD on hand or perhaps members of the LAPD not working as police that evening, but as security.
They were there.
Couldn't they have just arrested them for doing that? Do you really need somebody to quote-unquote press charges if they see a crime? Can't they just arrest someone?
I mean, a citizen's arrest is, by the victim, could be done.
But by the police if they see the act go down, even if the person doesn't want to press charges?
Well, the answer is, I think they could, but no prosecutor, especially in a high-profile case, is going to proceed to prosecute if the victim is not willing to testify, is not willing to even have the wrongdoer, the suspect, the perpetrator, arrested. If he doesn't want it, if he's not going to cooperate with the criminal justice system, they're not going to force Chris Rock to testify if he doesn't want to. The last thing in the world they need is a reluctant witness. who may say, it wasn't my idea to arrest him or to prosecute him. And then the jury was most likely not convict under those circumstances. So, I think realistically, no. Even though they may have witnessed it and there were police officers there, no, I don't think that the outcome in terms of the criminal justice system would be any different.
Is that one of the things that makes it so difficult when women are battered and they have this kind of, I don't know if it's the right term, but almost Stockholm syndrome with, abusive husbands or boyfriends or significant others?
Yeah, and that's slightly different, and I'm glad you mentioned it. I mean, because I don't think you could accuse Chris Rock of having Stockholm syndrome.
No, clearly not.
I know, but I'm saying there have been some domestic violence cases where the victims say, well, I changed my mind, I don't want to testify, or, I did call the police, but 911, but I really don't want them arrested. There have been some cases where they'll arrest anyway, and then later see if she's changed her mind or not, and wants to, will be willing to testify. There have been also some rare, I think it's rare, where they'll go ahead with the prosecution, even though the victim says she doesn't want to testify. But generally, in a situation like with Will Smith and Chris Rock, it's not like there's a shortage of criminal cases in Los Angeles. There are many, many very serious cases, and they can't prosecute all of them, so they have to make decisions carefully, and I think they wouldn't prosecute in this case at all.
Indeed.
If Chris Rock didn't want to testify, didn't want him arrested.
Well, as always, Gloria, you've been able to put a fine point on things for us. I thank you so much for you weighing in on that, and again, congratulations to you and all you've done to. I'm going to use a broad term to further the rights and the representation of the underdog and of course women as a whole. But I always look at it. You're willing to take on the underdog cause, the unpopular cause. I know you certainly stood up to former President Trump when a lot of people weren't willing to stand up. So I hope people recognize that, and I hope you keep on keeping on.
I promise you I will. For as long as God gives me this gift of life, I love fighting against injustice, and I'm going to do it for the rest of my life.
Well, God bless you.
Thank you so much.
Attorney Allred, this summer will be the first time in the history of the United States Supreme Court that we will have 4 women on the court. What does that mean to you in closing?
And I've been very fortunate to meet all of them. And in fact, on the homepage of my webpage, GloriaAllred.com, there are photographs of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and me, which I'm so thrilled to be able to have there. And so I've met Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who is another one of my heroes. She's a wonderful person as a human being and a terrific justice in her own right. And I've also met Justice Kagan. And all I can say is, having yet another justice on the Supreme Court of the United States who is a woman is terrific. And it reminds me of what Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said one time when someone asked her, said there are 9 justices on the U.S. Supreme Court. How many of them should be women? And her answer was 9. And they said to her, 9? And she said, yes, 9. No one was disturbed or surprised when there were 9 men on the United States Supreme Court for so many years. Why should it be surprising or have anyone think there's anything wrong if there are 9 women?
So for Powerhouse attorney Gloria Allred, featured columnist Jay Billstein, and CYInterview, I'm Christiana.